About 20 African leaders, international institutions, and other delegates started their Feed Africa Summit in Dakar, Senegal on Tuesday. The summit was headlined by the African Union and the African Development Bank. Is a follow-up to the first meeting back in 2015 when the Feed Africa strategy for agricultural transformation in Africa was proposed. Here is President Macky Sall of Senegal saying Africa must produce more food instead of relying on imports and aid. Now, the African Development Bank has proposed a $10 billion pledge over the next 5 years to turn Africa into a breadbasket. And we're joined by Sanyade Okoli, CEO Alpha African Advisory, to talk about this. Good morning to you and Happy New Year. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Welcome back, Richard.
Thank you. So that quote from the president of Senegal, what do you make of it? Because we keep hearing this over and over again. Africa must feed it. So is it easier said than done?
Yes, but you can't refute what he said. We do have to feed ourselves.
Okay.
We're essentially facing a global food crisis, and we cannot remain dependent on other continents for food when they themselves are potentially facing a crisis. They're not going to prioritize sending their reserves to us, in times of difficulty. So we do have to do it. But, I was thinking about it, and, as you read around the topic, I think part of why people like you and I struggle is we have these political leaders, they go to these events, they speak words which are grammatically, sound, great vocabulary, but sounding terribly academic and, quite frankly, insincere.
Right.
And so you just think, oh, for goodness sake, there we go again.
Right.
But it is a necessity, and now more so than ever.
Okay, the United Nations says about 275 or 278 million Africans are facing a food crisis. Now, much of where... Go ahead.
That's 1 in 5 Africans, by the way.
Right.
To put it as a ratio,
Yeah, but the nations where they live are facing these heavy debt burdens. So how do you feed all these people when you can't even get your economy to, or you're facing debt and you don't have the money to feed them, basically? I mean, how do you get out of this?
So maybe let's shift how we look at it.
Yeah.
It's more a case of how do we enable our citizens to feed themselves.
Okay.
We know the government can't feed us.
Right.
But what the government needs to do, and what, across every sector, the private sector people are crying out to say, create the enabling environment. We don't need you to do everything. Because quite frankly, most times you're not even well positioned to do so, either from the financial resource or the human resource. But create that enabling environment that will enable us to do what we need to do.
Okay, another quote from Mr. Macky Sall. He says about 60%, this arable land thing, it said President Buhari here in Nigeria has said it, we have the potential with about 60% of arable land here that is not exploited. It is paradoxical that we still need to import the essentials of what we need. I want to ask you about what is needed to extract the food from this arable land that they say is in such vast abundance? The technology needed, the labor. Again, I ask, is it easier said than done to just say we got so much land and we should just be producing food out of the ground?
Can I tell you what I believe is the root cause?
Please, we're always right, so please tell me.
I think what we face on the continent is a mindset issue.
Okay.
In the first instance, we don't even believe in ourselves.
Fair, okay.
We don't believe that we have what it takes. We have the capacity to feed ourselves. If we don't believe, we're not going to execute.
So you think we have the potential and the capabilities to do so?
60% of the world's arable land, one continent.
Right, has it. Right.
Of the uncultivated arable land.
Yeah.
We have people, young people, but have we trained them? Have we given agriculture the level of significance and importance in our countries to make our teenage children, when they're choosing subjects, think that I'm going to study something related to agriculture? Do
they find it cool? Do the young people?
But that's what I mean. So
that's the mindset. Okay.
And because we haven't elevated agriculture, when we think of agriculture, we're still thinking of sustenance,
and all
exactly.
Those, right.
The technology exists. We can buy it in, even if we don't have it.
Yeah.
It's more a case of think about it, Reuters, think about your life.
Yeah.
When you decide you're going to do something and you set your mind to it and you let your beliefs line up with your intent,
gotcha.
You achieve it.
You're there aligned.
Similarly, if we do the same, but again, part of it is our political structures, right? Because we have political structures that ensure that, and I use the word ensure deliberately, that those who are good at politics get to the top, but they're not necessarily the best leaders.
Right.
They might just be the best politicians. So that means they are not equipped to provide the leadership required to enable us to fulfill the vast potential that we have.
Okay, great. I agree. Well said. What about this climate change matter? Because much of the continent is being impacted by climate change. You've got droughts, you've got floods, you've got all these issues. And the answer that is being proposed is an energy transition to renewables. But yet, the African nations that are being disproportionately impacted by climate change are fossil fuel dependent. And so therefore, to some extent, resistant to the energy transition that will get them out of the climate change. So how do you get out of that? Okay,
do you know why they're resistant?
Well, I know jobs.
3% of the global emissions come from the continent. 3%. And they're thinking, guys, but yet the continent is most impacted by climate change. So it's like we haven't had, quote unquote, our fair share of emissions to enable us to develop. We are suffering the greatest impact. And you say transition, we're not yet in a place. Having said that, climate change isn't addressing and taking steps for the energy transition, etc. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. So it's not like, oh, we must now achieve our own fair share of global emissions. No, unfortunately, it is what it is. But we have to say, given where we are, what is best? And part of that, what is best is, yes, it is energy transition. But as I said, we're not in the position to do it at the same rate as other parts who, quite frankly, are the ones polluting the environment.
Like the Chinas and the USs of this world. We're out of time. Next time you have me on globalization and protectionism and self-sufficiency. We got to talk about that when we have you on the show. Sanyade Okoli, CEO, Alpha African Advisory. Always a pleasure having you to discuss these issues. Thank you so much for joining us.